Hello, I'm How To Bob, and I made this video to show you the step-by-step process I use to rebuild a window screen. I have all the materials together that I'll need. I have the screen frames, the corners, the spline, the screen itself, some frame screens, some plastic pull tabs, a little screwdriver, some clamps, the knife, spline roller, and hacksaw, along with a file. You can see the old screen is pretty bent up, so I'm going to take some measurements from the old screen, both sides. And what I do is take the measurements, take the overall, and I minus 1.5 inches for each direction for the corners. So you can see I have a 38 by 32 and a quarter, and I'm going to cut my frames down to the correct size now. I'll start out with the 36.5, and I'll need 2 identical pieces of screen frame cut to 36.5. Mark my pieces, and then I'll mark the other side pieces, and those are going to get cut at 30 3/4, and that'll give me the correct size once I put the corners in. I'm going to use a hacksaw to cut these, and I want to use a real fine tooth hacksaw because the frames on these are very thin, and I'll start by drawing the hacksaw back just to get it started. And once the saw works its way through, the frame will bend down, and I'll cut a little bit more, and then I can take the frame and just work it back and forth, and it'll snap off and give me a nice edge. And then I'll file the edge off a little bit just to make it nice and clean. Then I'll repeat the process for all 4 pieces of frame. Once I get done, I'll have 4 pieces of frame, 2 of each size, and I can lay them out. I want the channel should be facing all the same way, all towards the inside. And then I can get my corners and press those in. They'll only fit in one way. And you can see that that makes up the difference for what I measured. So I'll resume going around all of my frame pieces until I get a complete frame. They just slide right in. And I've got one more piece. Slide that in and plug in the last piece. So I have my frame together now. Now there's these things here, they're called frame springs. Some windows use those. If you want to use those, you simply push those in and then put the corner back in, and you can see it holds it into place, and you'll put one on the other side as well. For this screen, I'm not going to be using them, but I am going to use the plastic pull tabs. So this is the up side of the screen, so I'm going to put my plastic pull tabs at the bottom, and I want to put them at an equal distance away from the end. After I clamp my frame down, I'm going to roll out the screen, and for this screen I'll be using PET screen. It's the same as the standard fiberglass, except it's a little bit thicker. You can use it with fiberglass. There's also aluminum. There's many types of screening material you can use, but I'm going to use the PET screen for this one. I have my spline rolling tool here, and it has 2 sides on it, one concave and one convex. And I'll be rolling the spline in using the concave side of my spline rolling tool. The spline that I'm using for this particular screen is 0.125 or 1/8 inch diameter spline, and you have to match the spline diameter up to the thickness of the screen along with the thickness of the groove. So if you're using like a PET screen, you'll want the 1/8 inch. If you're using aluminum, you want the 1/8 inch, but if you're using regular fiberglass, it's a little thinner. You can use the 0.140 spline, and you just kind of match it up with the thickness of the screen and your groove thickness. So now that I get to the corner here, I'm going to use the screwdriver and press my spline into the corner so I get a nice tight corner. My spline roller doesn't go all the way to the edge, so use a small screwdriver. Some spline rollers have a little piece or a tab that you can use to push in the corners. This is just a basic spline roller here. And then I'll make around the corner and start using the roller. Gets a little difficult where the pull tabs are to push in. You have to push it in a little bit harder. I'll take my spline and just feed it down the screen. And I'll go over the spline a few times and work the corner in again. And I want to keep the screen pretty straight with the frame to make sure there's no wrinkles in my screen once it gets tightened up. I just keep rolling my spline in until I get to the end. And then I can make my corner once again using a small flathead screwdriver by pushing it down into the channel, and then resume rolling my spline in. So I've got my spline all the way around. I'm going to take the knife and cut the leftover spline off, and then I can push it in all the way. And I'm going to use the convex side here and go around the screen spline one more time, and this will push it in a little deeper, pull my screen a little tighter, get any of the wrinkles out, any of the loose pieces of screen that you might see. Just pull it real nice and tight, push the spline in all the way into the channel. Gives you a nice tight screen. Just go around the whole perimeter of the screen. Okay, next I'm going to use my utility knife, and I'll put it up against the spline on the outside of the screen and run it down against the frame from one side to the other, and then I can pull my screen back, turn my screen around, and start on the corner and run the knife all the way down to the next corner, and rotate the screen again. And this is the side with the pull tabs, so sometimes the pull tabs will make it a little more difficult. I have to cut these a couple different times, make sure I have all the fiberglass cut. Don't want to pull up on the screen too much or it'll pull the spline out. And then I've got the final side to cut. And I pull the screen off once I get it all cut. Got a last little piece here. Then I'll double check, make sure all that my corners are pressed in. Make sure the spline is tight. And we'll take a look at our screen. So that's how you rebuild a Windows screen. If you found this video helpful, make sure you hit the thumbs up and go ahead and hit that subscribe while you're there too. I'm How To Bob. As always, thanks for watching.